Welcome to Open My Eyes podcast, where we learn to become our authentic selves, the best version of ourselves. I'm your host, Nathaniel Deweese. Some things are not taken away, it's given. Some things are not taken away, they are given away. What does that mean exactly? Let's use the example of we come into a relationship. We meet a new partner. We meet somebody who we thought was on the same wavelength as us, who we thought was on the same level as us, who we thought that we was able to grow and build with. So what do? We start to open ourselves up. We start to make ourselves more vulnerable to these individuals, and we start to give ourselves away in ways to where we are starting to feel more comfortable and where we are starting to feel more accepted by the person who we decided to invest ourselves in. There's nothing wrong with that process. There's nothing wrong with getting yourself into something that you believe is the right choice. There's nothing wrong with getting yourself into something that you think and that you hope will be more futuristic, more long term, something that you're looking at as a future relationship that's going to last for a long period of time. So we make ourselves more vulnerable to individuals and we start to give ourselves away. The issue is that after we have given ourselves away, the relationship doesn't work. The relationship ends up falling to the ground. And now we're stuck with all of the pieces of our life that we're trying to put back together. We're trying to figure out what happened. We're trying to figure out where things went wrong. We're trying to figure out what happened overall. Did I do something wrong? Did I say something wrong? There's so many elements to that. So we use the element called time, and we'll say in our minds that I will be okay in time, which you will. But time is a temporary fix without the work. There has to be work involved in order for time to do its thing. Time will cause the pain and the heartbreak separation, but by no means does it fix or correct the issue. We get stuck on the time factor, and we use the time factor for our benefit because time away from something helps us feel better. If you spend enough time away from anything, you tend to forget it. As I stated in the last podcast, out of sight, out of mind. Time itself does not heal wounds. It just prolongs the process. There has to be an awareness and there has to be something that takes place that remedies that time factor. Here's an example. A person who finds himself in an intimate type relationship, investing themselves in an intimate type of way, creates a bond with the individual. They create chemistry, they create intimacy, they create a connection. But when that connection is broken and there's no work, sometimes we tend to go on the rebound to try to fulfill that emptiness or that void. But that doesn't necessarily work for a long period of time. Yes, you might get some pleasure. Yes, you might feel good. Yes, you might think that everything is okay. You might be on this high because the dopamine is really high and the pleasure center has been satisfied, but it does not dismiss that no work has been done. So we use the time factor. It's been 2 years. You have not dated. You have not talked to anybody. You haven't done any kind of work. The next person comes along. you find yourself entering into this relationship or this courtship with this individual, and all of a sudden it feels good. You are seeing all of the good traits. You're seeing all the good characteristics of this person. And all of a sudden, now because you haven't healed, you're looking for something to go wrong. Why? Because when you don't do the work, the familiar shows up. I'm sure we all heard the term that we are attracted to the familiar. Well, the familiar thing and the familiar person, the familiar traits tend to show up at the time where we are at our most vulnerable. So he shows up, she shows up, they look like they fit the part that you're looking for. But the reality of it is that you just attracted the same thing that you hadn't fixed. You attracted the same thing that you hadn't fixed. Why? Because time does not heal all things without the work. You're trying to invest and you're trying to do something different. You're trying to show a different side of yourself. You're trying new experiments. You're trying new endeavors, all of that, and it only works for a moment until your insecurity is triggered, until something makes you uncomfortable, until something reminds you of what the last person did, or what the last person before that did, or what the last 2 or 3 people did. It reminds you of the things that you have not dealt with. Sweeping it under the carpet does not equal healed. Forgetting about it does not equal healed. Trying not to remember it does not equal healed. It speaks delay. And delay has a tendency to show up at the most inconvenient times and at the times when you don't want it to. But what happens when it shows up? It begins to reveal our insecurities. It begins to reveal our shortcomings. It begins to show the other person, or we begin to see the flaws in that person. Why? Because when we meet somebody, we are trying to not make ourselves vulnerable to them. But we're looking for every opportunity to spot where they are weak at, the spot where they might be vulnerable at. Why? All in the due protection of ourselves. We want to be able to hide ourselves enough that we are not exposed enough, but yet we claim that we want love without healing. How does that work? I dealt with the situation of trying to give myself in situations or to people when I haven't healed. And I found myself covering myself up a lot. I found myself feeling uncomfortable. I found myself using or finding ways to sabotage the relationship. I found myself on defense with the walls up, hiding behind the walls of my heart and not giving the individual or the person the opportunity to even come in. I found myself comparing that person to the previous person, seeing that person with the last person's face. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was bleeding all over them. I was hurting all over them. So what did I do? I really had to be honest with myself and take a step back. Why? Because when your vulnerabilities are showing, it makes you feel uncomfortable. It makes you feel uneasy. It makes you question who you are. When was the last time you dealt with heartbreak? And what was your response? Did you rebound? Did you run away? Did you use the time factor? Did you say, I'm not going to deal with this? Did you completely shut down to the world and to the possibility of ever being connected to anybody ever again, that's what I did. I shut down and I said, I don't want to feel this pain no more. I don't want to hurt anymore. I don't want to go through this anymore. People are not really worth it. No one is really trying to be real. No one is really trying to be authentic. When the truth of the matter was, I myself wasn't being authentic. I myself was not being real. I myself could not even face my own insecurities and my own vulnerabilities, more or less allow myself to be vulnerable to somebody else. Why? Because I didn't realize that there was necessary work that had to be done in the time that was allowed to me, that was permitted to me. I had to go and identify what kind of work I needed to do. How do I know what kind of work needed to be done? Well, I can look back at the past relationships and see where things went wrong. Did I start acting jealous? Did I start acting insecure? Did I start acting controlling? Did I start wanting more time? Did I start smothering them? I can really go back and think about what it is I contributed to the failure of the relationship. So using this concept called time, I will make an excuse for why I wouldn't want to move forward. I will make an excuse for why I couldn't do certain things. I will use the time concept and say that I'm healed because a certain amount of time has lapsed, a certain amount of time has gone by. But that was probably the greatest deception that I could ever tell myself, that I was healed because time itself healed me. What was really going on is that every time something familiar showed up, it would trigger the things which I did not allow myself to heal from. Every time something would show up that reminded me of the last two people, the last three people, guess what else showed up? That pain, that hurt, that vulnerability, that disappointment, the upset. Every time I would go forward and try to build something with someone else without doing the work, it will fail time and time again. Why? Because there was no work that was done in between that time. I think what happens is that we are not used to being alone, that we are built for connection. So anytime that connection is disrupted or interrupted, or there's time in between that, we start to feel lonely. We start to feel uncomfortable. We start to feel like we're never going to meet Mrs. Right. We're never going to meet Mr. Right. It's never going to happen for me. We start to make these things up in our mind. And the fact of the matter is that we really start to believe it. We start to believe the very lies and the very creations that we have created or we have allowed to take place in our mind. There has to be a drawback. The drawback is that in time, when things happen, I need to use that time to work on and identify myself. I need to start to work on becoming the best version of myself so I can be the best version of me, not for anybody else, but for myself. When I came up with that concept, it totally changed my mind. I went on this journey called the identification of self, and I started to go to work. I started to sit there in my vulnerability, in the things that caused me pain and the things that brought me shame. I started to sit in that, and I started to realize and see the patterns of not healing. I started to see how my separation anxiety showed up. and it ruled and dictated the relationship. I started to see how that began to play a factor in how I wanted to control the other individual, which caused division in a relationship. I started to see the errors of my way. And the part that really got to me is that I stopped being afraid of my feelings. See, a lot of us are taught that we are to be seen and not heard as children. A lot of us are taught that we don't need to feel anything. We just need to live our lives. A lot of us have been sheltered and kept away and protected out of our no harm to our parents. They have sheltered us and protected us from feeling and from being disappointed and from being rejected and from being hurt. We have been sheltered, some of us, from that stuff. And now it shows up in your adult life. Now it shows up in your adult life. It shows up in your relationship. Your insecurities show on your job. Your insecurities show in your friendship. They just shine through. But we don't think it's a problem. Why? Because we were taught, or we saw that this was probably normal. And we acted out of that in its normality. It wasn't until somebody said, hey, is there something wrong with this? Do you see the pattern of what's going on? Have you ever stopped and thought about that maybe, possibly, it could be you? That you could be the issue? That you could be the problem? That you could be the contributor? That not everybody is always out to get you? That not everybody is always out to cause you pain? That not everybody is always out to take advantage of you? Have you ever stopped to think that maybe it's you? And that was for me a cold reality. That was for me an eye-opening experience. And I realized that I had to go and do the work. I had to learn to sit in my loneliness. I had to learn to sit in my vulnerability. I had to learn to sit in being by myself. And during those times, I started to work on me. I started to build my confidence. I started to build my self-esteem. I started to work on becoming secure. I worked from being anxious and needy into having a more secure attachment. I stopped depending on other people to make me feel a certain kind of way. I stopped depending on other people to validate me. I had to learn to love me and appreciate me and to value me before anybody else could give it to me. I had to be able to give it to myself. And it was a hard lesson to learn, but I'm glad I took the time to learn that lesson because it changed my life. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining today's podcast. I hope it was inspirational to you. Let's continue to build, inspire, and grow together. Until the next podcast. For your continual support, please follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks again.